words. I am particularly happy about this today because in the last 2 days, more than 24 hours, I've been working 10 hours a day, addressing these issues in various channels. I even discovered there are some channels which we had not even heard about. So suddenly they discovered me, and my home has been virtually, occupied by cameras and crew, in spite of the pandemic fear and so on. Why I'm happy? Because I believe that the epicenter of international relations and analysis should be at the university, not Kerala International Center or television channels. This is something I firmly believe in. And that is the reason why when I set up this KIC, as the pillars of the KIC, I invited all the international relations department professors and others, and that remains the main pillar. And that is the strength of the KIC, though it has been not meeting because of the pandemic, etc. But we have been doing our best, and also in the process of educating our civil service candidates, I've also been posting my lectures on the websites and YouTube and so on. So I'm sure you must be at least seeing them, if not listening to them, and that gives me a bit of comfort. But the primacy of it should remain in the politics department of the Kerala University. I think you have to be very, very careful about. You should not lose that, because what gives it scholarly academic authority to what appears in Kerala should come from the university. I know some of you participate in these discussions, but they are not enough. And that is why I was very delighted, even though I had so many engagements today, writing and reading, I already agreed to Girish's invitation, because this primacy we have to re-establish. One way is to, of course, get you all onto television, but television is not the place for scholarly discourse. I myself make it light and diluted when I speak on television. And now, unfortunately, since many of you don't engage in this, all these channels have developed some expertise, what so-called expertise in international relations. Each of them seems to have somebody who follows it. But their following these issues are very different from what we do, because they are very peripheral. They look for a sensation. Like, for example, the whole analysis of the Ukrainian crisis has now shifted the rescue of Indians from those regions. I'm not saying it's not important, but they don't want to hear anything else. They only want to know what the girls are saying, the boys are saying, and half the time is spent on that. It's very good for their parents to know all this. So their focus is very different. But you and I are not going to focus that much on it, even though our sympathy is always for them. And it will be a great calamity if something happens to even a single person in this 16,000 people who are stranded there. So it's a matter of priority. And so you must recapture that. The center of excellence in international relations must be in the politics department of the Kerala University. I'm so glad that you are doing that, you are recapturing it. As far as the topic is concerned, I have nothing new to offer, I'm sure. I'll only just put it together in a constructive and a tabular kind of form so that we can have a discussion, so that we can have expressions of various points of view. So I would basically summarize the issues, and then after that we can discuss it more. So what is happening today, as of this morning, is that Putin is going ahead with a victory. There is no question about it. From a villain, he has become a victor. That is the latest development, whether you like it or not. But the point that we have to make is this is going to be a Pyrrhic victory. This victory is not going to get him any advantage globally. If anything, his credibility has been lost. His respectability in the international community has diminished, and even his power over his people have diminished as a result of his latest actions. Let's see what he started off with. He started off with a scare that the security of the Russian Republic is in danger because Ukraine has been slipping into the NATO and European Union stranglehold. This was his first complaint. And so he said, I want security guarantees. Of course, the West has acted foolishly also by not giving those security guarantees. What do they lose? Are they interested in getting Ukraine and Georgia into the NATO? Is NATO's existence depend on these countries joining it? After all, what is the purpose of NATO? In fact, Clinton had offered even Russia to join NATO. That would have destroyed NATO anyway. So into that context, to raise this great scare that this is going to happen, without the people did not realize that this is the thin end of the wedge, and he was going to do other things. And that was not realized, and that's why everybody took it coolly. Oh, he only wants security guarantees. We'll give it to them, but we can't give it to them so easily, etc. The only man who predicted a war among all the human beings on this earth was President Biden. Nobody believed him because nobody believes him. His credibility is so low. But he was accurate by the hour, by the minute of the attack. Nobody else, including all the wise people like you and me, predicted that there will be no war. And that was the credibility of President Putin. And now where does it stand? Can he just say, oh, I fooled everybody, like that village boy who said, this, wolves are coming or whatever. So that is what he has done. But that has done a huge dent to him. And then he shifted from there. On his 21st February speech, he blamed all the Soviet leaders, starting from Lenin. Of course, Lenin had been downgraded and all that. But no president of Russia has any right to criticize all these people, starting from Lenin, Stalin, Gorbachev, of course, naturally, but also Khrushchev and others, and saying that these are the Bolsheviks or the communists who destroyed the Soviet Union. And now it is my responsibility to retrieve it. And I'm duty bound to retrieve it, and I shall do so. So that changed the whole tenor and tone of the debate. In fact, there was no debate. Who can question whether these people were responsible, what happened to the Soviet Union? Are these people the only responsibility? What did the United States do? What did the whole West do? What did the whole of NATO do? What did all the non-aligned do? All of us destroyed the Soviet Union because we had complaints against them. So you cannot just put the blame on Lenin, Stalin, and Khrushchev. So it was obviously he was preparing for war to conquer Ukraine. And the best way is, of course, to blame your predecessors for it. And that is what people did not again look up. But then again, he waited for 2 days. He went into these two regions and waited for 2 days to see what these gentlemen were going to do. And both President Biden and the European Union kept their word. They said that we will not fight against Russia. We will crumple them with sanctions. And what sanctions? 5 banks were not allowed to take loans from the West. Suspend, not stop the pipeline. Very mild sanctions, which would not have hurt him at all. So on 24th, he was ready with a very good historical argument and a very poor and tame reaction from the West. This is what encouraged him to go through so swiftly into Ukraine. So it is the US and NATO actually played into the hands of President Putin. So foolish acts on the part of President Putin, President Biden, and the European Union have landed us in a war. But fortunately, this war will end very soon. In fact, I had not expected President Zelensky to fight so much. I had not thought of him as a great hero of the people. But having watched him over the last few days, I've become a great admirer of Zelensky. Look at his background. He was a comedian. But as a comedian, what he did was, he built a political empire for himself, reminding us of M.G. Ramachandran and Jayalalitha. What did they do? They produced lots of movies. In both of them were the greatest souls on earth. The friends of the people, the upliftment of human beings, upper caste, lower caste differences. It was all in the movies. But the people believed them. They are good people. I don't know what nasty things Jayalalitha did or MGR did. But they projected this through the movies, and then they shifted to politics. They had built an image. That's exactly what Zelensky did. His television series was A Servant of the People. That was a series. And the hero was a servant of the people, heroic, fighting on stallions for the poor people of the world and so on. And then the name of his party was Servant of the People. Can you believe that? A typical M.G. Ramchandran act. And he got 73%, 73.2% majority in his first attempt in 2018. And then he started living up to his reputation. He, sent out the Adanis and Ambanis of Ukraine out, took away their economic and political clout on himself, saw Putin as an enemy right from the beginning. His famous words were, there is only one thing common between Russia and Ukraine, the border, nothing else. No culture, no political relationship, no great bonds of friendship, nothing. So he was a realistic, pragmatic, committed nationalist leader, which he is. And he has proved his mettle now. I had thought that the war will end in 2 days. It would be in the best interest of himself and the people of Ukraine, I would say. I said this to my son. He said, how dare you say that to a country? How can you say to a country, please go and surrender to save your life? Don't say it ever, he said. He was right. I didn't think about it. But I said that my saying wouldn't matter. But even if I had said that, that would have made no difference to Zelensky. So he is standing up there using the social media. I don't think Putin has the capability to use social media like that, or any of us. And he is smiling, young man, 44 years old, handsome, well-fed, saying, we are here to save our life. We have not gone anywhere. He has not behaved like the Afghanistan president. So, but what is the consequence of it? Consequence is not success for Ukraine. It will be a failure for Ukraine. They will suffer immensely because of the war. Because it depends, the more they persist, the worse it will become. But there will be a role model, and it will be a warning to Russia that they cannot run roughshod over the republics. So the whole thing starts with the personality of Putin. That's what we have to analyze. He is obsessed with the grandeur of Soviet Union. Very clear. Having been a KGB agent, having dirty tricks for Soviet Union, he cannot imagine serving a country which has no clout in this world. From a superpower to a third-rate or third-grade power was painful for him. And so from 2000 onwards, first he built himself up as a personality, projected himself as a strong leader. And his mission, now finally he has revealed, this was suspected, that was to restore the glory and grandeur of the Soviet Union through a new Russian Republic. That is very clear. And the reluctance of the US and Europe to intervene militarily in Ukraine encouraged him to embark on an adventure with grave implications for the globe. And so this is going to be a Pyrrhic victory for him. He will win this battle, but he'll lose the war, because eventually, I think, Ukraine will become the Vietnam of Russia. And I read a very interesting article today, a gentleman called Max Hastings. He had done a major study on the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. And he has stated, I'm quoting him, Putin is not Hitler, not Stalin, not Mao. Instead, he is something much smaller, the capo of a nuclear-armed gangster clique. I had not come across the word this capo before. I suppose the head, the capo of a nuclear-armed gangster clique. But he has shown willingness to use terrible force to promote his own grandeur in a fashion that, unlike the Cuban Missile Crisis, may yet need to be met with Western arms. How prophetic and how perspicacious his words are. So in other words, we have already started witnessing what could be called, these are my words, not his, the birth pangs of a post-COVID-19 world. It has just begun. And the unscripted story of the future is yet to be played out. Then just to recap what happened in a few words. The massive deployment of Russian forces on its border with Ukraine in November 2021 was the first sign of the present disaster. But it could be traced back to 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea on the ground that it was a Russian gift to Ukraine in the first place. And then Putin insisted that he had no intention to invade Ukraine, stating that the red line for any action would come only if Ukraine joined NATO. So except President Biden, most people believed him, and an attack was not imminent, we thought. Even this repatriation of Indians was delayed because of our conviction that there would be no war in a hurry. I even tweeted when the first repatriation orders were issued that we are going to be in a hurry. Because I have some specific, I'll not go into that now, about our philosophy of quitting any place which gets into trouble. Our instinct is immediately to pull back Indians. That's not the right way to do it. But then that you have to balance with the security of the people. That we will have another occasions to discuss. And then we had this peacekeeping mission to the republics, and then the declaration of his largest intention, launching what he called as special military operations with the object of demilitarizing Ukraine, but not occupying it. That also he has proved wrong or deliberately misleading. So Putin's credibility was completely lost, and he is currently entangled in a major unequal war with tiny Ukraine without any sign of an immediate victory because of the heroic resistance of President Zelensky, who himself has the first name Vladimir, though the spelling is different. In Ukraine it is Volodymyr, which is the same character. Although it is a matter of time before Ukraine is subdued and brought under a Russian puppet regime in Ukraine, but judging from the resistance so far, a long guerrilla war appears to be in the offing. As I said, it might become Russia's Vietnam. Well, now let us look at the international reaction. I know our focus has to be on India, but the events is one of shock, surprise, and condemnation. But as expected, a strong draft resolution of the Security Council was vetoed by Russia, with 11 positive votes and abstentions by China, India, and the UAE. You know all this. Ironically, China and India appear to be on the same side, but this is not true. The abstention by India is entirely different from the abstention by China. I'm sure those who understand the UN will understand it. Because originally in the Charter, it says that any Security Council resolution to be adopted must have the positive vote of the permanent members, right? And it cannot be interpreted as abstention. But over the years, it has been interpreted as abstention, and China has abstained on some major resolutions in the Security Council and allowed them to pass. So what is it that China is conveying? China is also conveying some kind of neutrality in this case. Otherwise, they should have vetoed it. They had every reason to veto it, and frankly, I had expected them to veto it. But now, they have got us into trouble because all the social media is saying, why are we following China? Without understanding what each means. So ironically, China and India appear to be on the same side, despite vast differences between them on their worldviews. For India, now let us come to India. It was a matter of balancing two friends. While for China, it was a gesture of solidarity with its new ally. You know which country I mean. But though the Indian vote was neutral, the Indian explanation of the vote, sometimes it is more important than the vote, was explicit in its criticism of the Russian actions. India took back, as I tweeted, India took back with the left hand what it had given with the right. While China, by abstaining, gave Russia greater support than the abstention that we have made. This must be clearly understood. Though India did not mention Russia, it stated there are 4 or 5 points in the explanation of vote, which normally nobody reads. And this is a masterpiece of drafting, thanks to Tirumurthy or Jayashankar, I don't know who. But India, though India did not mention Russia, it stated that India is deeply disturbed by the recent turn of developments in Ukraine. No reference to aggression by Russia. But it reiterated its appeal for cessation of violence, which Russia doesn't like. No solution, I'm quoting from here, no solution can be arrived at the cost of human lives, said Ambassador Tirumurthy. He also flagged that India's core concern about the safety of about 16,000 Indian nationals stranded in Ukraine, which has now become the biggest foreign policy headache for the Prime Minister. God forbid if anything happens to them, he may even lose the next elections. So that is a big danger that he is facing and we are all facing. And India also touched upon the fundamental principle of respect for territorial integrity enshrined in the Charter. Remember, this is being said by the Indian representative, a country which supported the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan. Don't forget that. Most significantly, India regretted that the path of diplomacy was given up. So this is a clear indication of India's displeasure over the Russian action when the Indian Minister of External Affairs was physically present in Paris, negotiating or discussing or participating with the French president in a very active effort to persuade Putin from attacking. And so it was not only against the French president, but also in a sense against India, that he did not extend the courtesy of waiting for these discussions to be concluded. So he said, it's a matter of regret that the path of democracy was given up. We must return to it, said India, citing it as an important reason for its abstention. So there is a lot of criticism of what we did by people who should have known better. I don't mention any names. Anyone who's understood India's foreign policy cannot criticize the Prime Minister on this vote, because this is not Modi's vote. This is Indira Gandhi's vote. Let us remember that. And the India's vote in Afghanistan in 1979, we all remember. I was right in the middle of it. And in spite of the many changes that had taken place in the world and in India's own relationships, including the formation of the Quad. So such things have happened, but our vote is the same as in 1979. Just to tell you my personal experience, I was physically present there. When Vorontsov came and told the Foreign Secretary that we are sending a troop into Afghanistan, Foreign Secretary's immediate reaction, this was middle of the night, about 1 o'clock. I picked up the Soviet ambassador not from the embassy, from my hotel in my small Fiat car, into which he could not fit in because he is a tall man. Because we didn't want the Soviet car to come into the Foreign Secretary's hostel compound. And so I took him there, and Mr. Sathe's immediate reaction was, we are against it. His natural instinct. So he said, this is inadmissible, he said. But then he said, Mr. Ambassador, don't take my word as right one. I'll go and report to the Prime Minister, who happened to be Charan Singh, and he will give you an audience. So both of us straddled up to Racecourse Road and was it another road? Anyway, so we went up. Charan Singh was already up and about and fuming against the Soviets. Who are these fellows? What the hell do they mean by it? There is a non-aligned movement, blah, blah, blah. We supported him. We said, yes, yes. And then he said, okay, call Vorontsov. I'll give him a talk. So Vorontsov walked in, proudly with a head high and told the Prime Minister, Mr. Prime Minister, I'm just coming from Mrs. Indira Gandhi's home. Charan Singh did not know where to look. Here is the Prime Minister who is going to take over in the next 24 hours. Now, what is the point of Charan Singh saying anything to him? So he did not say, what did Indira Gandhi say? He just looked at him and he said, Mrs. Indira Gandhi was very appreciative and sympathetic to the Soviet action. Finished. The conversation ended. We all said goodbye and left. And the speech that Mr. Satya and myself wrote for Brajesh Mishra was sent to, not to Charan Singh, but Mrs. Gandhi's residence. There, Mr. T.N. Kaul was there ready with his pen and pencil to cut everything that we had written. He did virtually rewrote that speech and showed it to Mr. Satya. Mr. Satya said, sir, then why are we abstaining? If this is a speech you are going to make, you might as well vote against the resolution and support Soviet Union fully. That's what you're doing. Then T.N. Kaul smiled and said, we do something, we say something else. Good. That was the brief that we got. And Rajesh Mishra protested. You know that. See, he wrote back saying that I cannot read the speech. And you know what Mrs. Gandhi said? Change the permanent representative immediately. And that message was conveyed to him. And an office order was issued transferring him to Stockholm as the ambassador of India. But he said, read. Otherwise, we'll have somebody else to read it. Then poor Rajesh Mishra, who became a national security advisor of India, he had only one copy of the speech. He would not share it with anybody, not even with the embassy people. We had sent it to him and he put it in his pocket, walked in without a statement into the General Assembly, pulled it out, read it, walked out of the other hall with the speech in his pocket without giving it to anybody. I mean, this is how, statesmanship and national interests are protected. Then what are we crying about, this vote? It is entirely in the national interest. And ironically or interestingly, I would say this India's vote has been grudgingly accepted. I would not say accepted or approved by 3 parties, not 1 or 2. US is not unhappy. Ukraine is very happy. And Russia is not unhappy either. So it was a master stroke that way. Of course, its implications for the future and all that, I'll come to that later. But anyone who criticizes this vote does not understand history or India's mindset. And so we come to the last part, which is the emergence of a China, Russia, Iran, Pakistan axis. When I wrote about it first, everybody said, why are you becoming a Cassandra? This is what one of my colleagues wrote back to me. Srini, what has happened to you? And then she said, well, I hope you will not become like Cassandra and make these things come true. Right? And hasn't it come true already? Otherwise, how would Imran Khan be in Moscow when Putin is bombing Ukraine? It's the greatest irony of history. 25 years after the last Pakistani ruler visited Moscow, here is the Prime Minister of Moscow sitting or walking around in the Red Square and saying, I'm excited to see the bombs fly. What more do you want? And Xi Jinping enjoying the view from Beijing. And nothing worse can happen to India's position in the world than this. What was our vision? Our vision was not a unipolar world. We all know that. All of you are professors, we must have explained to your students. We wanted a multipolar world, thanks to K. Subramaniam, who is the father of Jayashankar. He started saying it many years ago. Nobody believed him. He said, we don't want a unipolar world. We don't want a multipolar world. We want bipolar world. We want a multipolar world. And he also said 6 countries, 6 poles. He defined them. He said United States, of course, Russia 2nd, European Union 3rd, China 4th, India 5th, and Japan 6th. Because the order has changed. But still, that is the scenario that we have been dreaming about and working for. And what was not visible was only who would be around us in our pole. And that was the big question. And what Mr. Narendra Modi is trying to do is to collect some people around the pole. Today, do you know how many are there with us, willing to do anything that we ask them to do? 2 countries. Anybody can guess. Bhutan and Mauritius. Nobody else. Is there any? This is a question which Stroke Talbot asked Jaswant Singh in my presence. So one day after coffee, chatting, Stroke Talbot asked Jaswant Singh, can I ask you a question, a simple, straightforward question? Of course, Jaswant Singh is always ready for any question. And then he said, which are the countries in the world today will follow India blindly if India is in danger of any kind? So Jaswant Singh was lost for words for a few seconds. And those few seconds uh, this guy Talbot drove in the worst nail. He said, "Don't tell me Bhutan and Mauritius," he said. It was a most painful moment for all of us. We were cringing, hearing the truth. So how do you expand this two into a group which stands by us? And that was the effort that he was making. He was trying to get in Russia, he was trying to get France, he was trying to get Germany in various ways by reassuring them to be a potential supporter, I wouldn't say follower, of the Indian pole. And that is what is collapsed now. Because now it is very surely it will be a three-point Cold War, and eventually it ending up with 2 points because Russia and China will work together, and these countries like Iran and Pakistan will all huddle around them. And so a new Cold War, a three-dimensional Cold War is going to happen. And where India will stay, we could have stayed in the middle with Russia, France, and Germany if it was a bipolar Cold War. So its consequences are immense. We will be forced to get closer to the Americans, right? Because the Quad and so on, we were trying to avoid it, but now we have no choice but to go get closer to the United States. But will the United States be willing to take us in their fold? Because we stand criticized for what we have done with Russia. And what the United States tolerated was Russia's military cooperation with India was tolerated. SS-400 missiles were allowed to be purchased without sanctions under CATSA. But why? Not because of any love for us, but because India's strength is an indirect strength for the United States in an eventual conflict with China. Not to fight in Ladakh, but if you have the clash of the titans, who will stand behind the United States in Asia? Nobody except India. And that is what is being hurt now. And they will be very cautious with us. And they will not want India to be involved too much into the Russian military structure. We are already 70% in it. And they will resent it, and that will be one of the major catastrophes that we can think of. So in the Melbourne, we saw, in the middle of all this, there was a meeting of in Melbourne of the foreign ministers of the Quad. What a tame conference it was. Because Jaishankar knew the enemy of the Quad is not only China, it's also Russia. Indo-Pacific is a dirty word, not only for China, but also for Russia. So he was very careful. Somebody asked him a specific question. What do you think of Ukraine? You know what he said? The foreign minister of India, he said that is not on the agenda of this conference. People will laugh. What is not on the agenda of the conference? The most burning question. And he said, well, whatever we have to say, we have said in the Security Council. I've never seen him so tame. He's very aggressive and very forthright. But his face fell when this question was asked to him. And the word Ukraine does not appear in the joint statement. Myanmar appears, of all things. Is Myanmar a more serious situation than Ukraine for us? So the nature of the Quad has changed in Melbourne, thanks to this. And so good. So they will now focus on the pandemic. They will focus on climate change. They will focus on alternate technologies. They will focus on supply chains. Good enough. These are all required and necessary, but you don't need a Quad for it. We could do this all bilaterally without creating a bloc, which is being called the Asian NATO. So it has been defanged by the Russians, and it has accepted that stature for us and moved on to all this. So the result of this for India, the Ukraine crisis, and what is going to follow is, as I put down here, that we will be more vulnerable to terrorism and tensions on our borders with China and Pakistan. This is the least I could write. I could write volumes about it, but then this is enough. So what do we need? The final solution: deft diplomacy, certainly, which we have, military preparedness, and self-reliant. I didn't use it Atmanirbhar because people will say I'm a Modi Bhatta. So I translated it into English. Then it doesn't have the BJP flavor. So, and self-reliant economic development have become more important than ever before. So I'll stop there.